Let's make one thing clear. As an artist, it's all about the music. It's not about the money.
If you look at the bigger names, artists that are well-known, Drake, these young boys who want to emulate them and say, I want his lifestyle. How do you get the message out there to the young kids?
If you really want to be the next Drake, think about what he struggled to get to where he's at, because there's a lot that isn't presented. You never know when this opportunity is going to come up again.
Exactly.
So be smart enough to save, because you don't know if there's another show that you'll be casted in.
You've got this voice and you want to spread this message. There's a higher power who's giving you the opportunity to do that. Now go out there and do it. Where do you start off with? It starts with the music. Getting your stamp of who you are in the industry. Recording, build those collaborations, put yourself out in social media.
If you want to continue in this industry, then you need to continue to put yourself out there, but always remember to have something to fall back on.
Thank you everyone for joining me on today's show. I'm thrilled to be having with me a husband and wife couple that has been in performing for many years, both from Broadway and currently in producing music. And I'd like you to welcome Dorothy and Johann Camat to the show. Thank you both for coming out.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thank you so
It's
much.
awesome to have you guys on. We've been friends for a long time, and This is a good time for us to catch up because I haven't seen you guys. It feels like 10 years. You look the same, except for the couple of gray hairs here that I'm also getting. So it's a reminder that you can't beat father time.
Exactly. It just shows wisdom.
Exactly.
At the end of the day.
Exactly.
That's what he likes to call it, wisdom.
Is that all the years of it? Exactly. Well, I'm excited to talk to you about your guys' career because we never actually sat down to get all the juicy details. I've heard parts of it over time, but I'm really excited to get that information from you, and more so to get it out there for everybody else to know that, especially if you want to be an artist or a performer or an actor, it's easy to look at those careers and see the good side of them, but then behind the scenes, how much work is involved, how you have to start, how you really don't make a lot of money in the very beginning because you're just trying to get your name out there, and just kind of overall your experience with that. So without taking too much time on my side, why don't you go ahead and give me like a quick spiel about who you guys are and where you've been, and we'll go from there.
Cool.
Yeah. So yes, I'm Dorothy, and my whole experience of my background in performing, I actually started at a very young age, and it was, I was involved in dance, and music was always in my family background growing up as a Filipino American. So when I was at a young age of 6, my mom was approached by a family member, or actually a friend from school, my kindergarten friend from school. Shout out to the McGraths. She had told my mom there's this show for kids that's auditioning in San Francisco, and they're looking for orphans for Annie, the musical. So my mom, not knowing, and a single mother, decided, okay, well, I'll just go. It seems like Dorothy has the background to just do it, and she sings and she dances. So long story short, got a call back, ended up going to New York, and then booking a role as Molly for the Broadway show. So we spent about 6 to 7 months in New York, and then it closed afterwards. So I closed the Broadway musical. And then throughout the years, I had an agent. I did other Broadway shows, but more of tours. So traveled to LA, did The King and I out here in San Francisco as well with the late Yul Brynner. Not a lot of people will know who Yul Brynner is unless you're older than me or understood like Western movies of that he did in the past. So that is my background. I then auditioned when I was in my senior year of high school for a musical called Miss Saigon, and didn't think anything of it. I actually cut class and thought, I'm going to just go do this because I haven't auditioned for a while. Mind you, I haven't been doing shows or anything. My mom wanted me to concentrate on school. And even though I still continued dance and singing on the side, it was just something to do. I just thought, I'm just going to audition to see what this is going to be like because I haven't done it. I haven't practiced it for a while. And then it got me a call back to Toronto, which then I landed the role. My mom found out. And because I was a minor then and still in high school, they had to let her know and ask for permission in order to cast me in the show. So when she said yes to it, that's when she told me about the situation, and she asked me if I wanted to take it, and I said yes.
How about that?
She understood. She knew that it was a one-time opportunity, and because my mom also had a background with music and performing, and I was her only kid, she thought, well, because I've gone through this route before with her, and now that she is a young adult, I think she just felt more comfortable for me to do it and not to pass it up. So she supported me, and then that's where I met this guy. This one.
Who am I?
Who are you?
Gosh.
And this was Toronto, right?
Yes.
This was Toronto. Yeah.
And you're from Canada, correct?
Yes, originally born in Montreal, Quebec, born and raised.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So how did you get into the acting sphere, and then how did it lead to you guys meeting in Toronto?
Honestly, it was the luck of the draw. I've never been in musical theater before. I really didn't know what it was. I didn't know the culture of musicals. I just loved dancing and singing R&B hip hop music. Back in the early 80s, evolving into the 90s, it was always breakdancing. It was always pop and locking. It was always the Running Man. So I was so involved with dancing and singing and soulful music coming from church. I would have never thought the opportunity would come along in musical theater. But there was one time, see, with me, I was very avid in association gatherings. So, of course, I would always sing and dance for different types of association, more focus along the West Indian Association of Montreal. And from that point forward, having to perform and just spend a lot of my time, singing cover R&B songs, my father was a little bit concerned. He was like, you have such a talent, but are you doing anything about it rather than just performing? Are you making this an opportunity for yourself elsewhere? And I said, well, I'm too young, to even figure out exactly what it is that I want to do. I do love music, and that's what I was born and raised with, is just listening to music all day. Until my father said, well, listen, showed me a newspaper ad of an open call to, of course, the musical Miss Saigon. I didn't know what it was about. We ended up going, and I sung a tune, and then all of a sudden, I got that opportunity to come back. They called me back. From that point forward, I flew out to Toronto with my father, and that was it. After that one audition, they just looked at me because I was somebody that was outside of the box from what they usually saw, which is a cast of, professional performers or experienced performers. Whereas for me, I was just that free-spirited artist that they loved to see in terms of dancing, in terms of my style of voice. And because of that, they gave me an opportunity to be part of the ensemble for Miss Saigon.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And in that industry, especially in the early 2000s, late 90s, is that where we're at?
Right.
Was it more just common that you're supposed to go to these, performer schools, and you get that credential, and then you go and apply for these careers? Or really it's a matter of you just have raw talent and then come and audition? This is how you get your name made, is through that way?
Well,
So I would say both.
Yeah.
Because, you have all of these sources like dance schools, voice coaches, those that are before they graduate from high school, right? Like high school, at least when we went to high school, we didn't have classes in school that were arts in that direction, right? So it was what you can find outside of it. Now, I think what we have in common is that our families always had music in our background. So we grew up singing. So it came naturally for us. And when our families find opportunities in this situation, like what we auditioned for, it depends on the description of it too. So just to give a background of musical theater for those who are interested or don't really understand what a process is like or what they're looking for too. With a show like Miss Saigon, they were looking for a lot of Asian actors because this show is about it's a love story that happens in Vietnam in the last few weeks of the war, right? So it's, and it was beautifully done. There's not a lot of choreography that you would expect in another musical, let's say like something like 42nd Street, which is very, you have to be a required dancer, a well-rounded dancer, as well as a strong vocalist.
Correct.
But with a show like Miss Saigon, our background of music, and as long as we could move well or have a bit of dance background, you were fit to audition for. So you didn't have to have major credentials, is what I guess I'm saying with a show like this, okay? But does it help? Of course. So thinking about it now and talking to people who are going to school to become a performing artist, whether it's in theater, straight plays, musicals, TV, whatever it is that they utilize their talents towards their degree, it is always something that you should consider because you're learning from the basic tools in order to understand how to be a better artist. But it is your responsibility as an artist to continue exercising and finding the tools to be the one that stands out.
Right.
Okay, so with us, I guess we stood out in what was familiar to us, that we were encouraged, go do this because we know you have the potential. And whether or not we didn't, if we didn't know what the turnout was going to be, like I said, I went and auditioned. I cut class to go to an audition, not expecting to stay back and be called back to do another dance routine for the creative team, And like him, he didn't know. When he got called back, you didn't know, right?
But then you look at the generation today, right? And you've got to have a triple package. And at the same time, they have more of an up when it comes to having that opportunity. Why? Because they don't necessarily need to have an agent these days. People are utilizing social media in the growth of data analytics, the amount of followers, how you're managing your social media in order to get your word out, in order to get yourself out. With us, I think, we needed somebody to represent us. But at the same time, we had those opportunities of casting calls. And as long as we went regularly and auditioned, yes, it's a dime a dozen, but at that time, it wasn't really about quadruple package, right? It was, if you can sing, great. If you can move into beat, great, right? But now you look at all these trained dancers who are like 18 and up, right? And they're bona fide in terms of what they do as a dancer or even a vocalist. So is the competition higher these days? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have the tools without having to sit down and wait for an agent to represent them. They have the tools to go out there and make a following.
Yes.
Create a following.
Well, I definitely want to get into that more. Before I get too far, I want to ask you about this too. Filipino-American, Filipino-Canadian, correct?
Correct.
This is back in the 90s too. Sort of what was the expectation of what you thought your life was going to be like? Did you grow up as a young kid thinking that performing was going to be a career? Were you kind of told that I'm supposed to follow a certain path here, and how did I break that mold? What was that, conversation like?
Okay.
Oh man. Yeah.
I don't know.
And
how...
Johann, I'm going to have you move the microphone a little bit up like that.
Sure.
There we go. That'll help out. Cool.
I think for me, I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school. And as a Asian American, there was expectations, obviously, of like going towards a career that was successful because that's what we were told. But because my mom, she was also a music teacher, and she always encouraged me to have. She always was supportive of my background in what I did, and she was always there. Any dance recitals, any competitions. She was one that would have like, a cassette tape of music whenever we're at family parties, and while she's playing mahjong, she's like, "Oh, go! There's a karaoke, go sing." And it's like, "But I wanna play with kids," But at the same time, these opportunities that were presented to us, I think we just had families that were just encouraging to say and supportive to say, "Do it." It's that once in a lifetime moment opportunity. Why not, right? And I think the difference between him and I in the sense of us doing it was I already had that background. So like I said, my mom kind of knew what to expect. Was she nervous about me moving to a whole different country at age 17? Didn't know what to expect. I think at that point she said, did the sign of the cross and said, "God be with you," but also was like very supportive and said, "Well, we'll make it work," and luckily we were part of a group, a production that was understanding in that sense, because we weren't the only Asians that were hired, right? That were casted, I should say. We were two of many Asians that were casted we were all in the same age group, surprisingly, right?
Yeah.
Some of us, not all of us. There was cast members that have been doing this for years. That was their career.
Yeah.
Okay, that was their career. They were in their late 20s. They were in their early 30s. And this was like maybe their fourth show under their belt on their resume.
Yeah.
Where this was his first one. This was my fourth one, but my first one as a young adult.
So you can envision that energy between experienced performers.
Yeah.
And as well as
very immature,
first
not
time.
knowing, is this a hobby?
Let's build a family. Let's all go out, because back then it was like a crew of 90210 folks.
Yeah,
right?
for us, this was like our college.
That was like
was our time of
experience.
like what college should have been for us.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that this was an opportunity to have a career out of it, and luckily, I actually lasted in the industry for about 7 years after,
Yeah.
Which is a long time for an Asian actor in musical theater, because it's hard. Back then, that was the only show that you weren't the token Asian that was hired.
Gotcha.
Okay, so when you think about other musicals, if you ever watched a musical and you saw an Asian in it, that was the token Asian, that every Asian that is going to audition is like, I need that. That's the part I want, right? Because that's how the casting is going to be done. They always want it to be diverse. So there's always that token Asian.
That was the way that they saw it back then, as well. We
Back
need to
then.
fill this role, so this person will do.
Well, not necessarily we need to fill this role. Remember, you have to have the requirements for it. So if they feel that you were the it factor, you had the dance background, you had the vocals, you can, do the role the way it needs to be. Like, for instance, Rent. Rent is another musical that actually has an Asian girl casted. Her name is Lexi Darling. And that role was, I think, specifically meant for an Asian to be casted in. So every production that I saw friends that did it, there was always Lexi Darling was always that Asian character. So it was casted for Asians, but that was the token Asian role in a musical like that. Right?
How about that? Never would have seen it that way.
Yeah.
What is your lifestyle like when you're in these roles? Because we really talked about the money that you actually make. Like, if you're a young person who's thinking about wanting to do this one day, obviously you see what the show is, you see all the pomp and circumstances, but you don't see what happens when the cameras are off. You don't see the days off. You don't see where people live. What is that lifestyle like? Is it enough money to survive off of? Are you sharing an apartment with 4 or 5 other the actors? How does that daily life actually work?
That's exactly it, Mike.
All right, we just
That's
solved it in 1
exactly it.
second.
I mean, at 18 years old, 19 years old, independence, right? You're not living under the roof of your parents. You can make your own calls, but of course, with us, we were very picky. We were picky of the people that we built relationships with, because where we come from, it's always family, family, family. And the bond will definitely move forward into building relationships where they have that same frame of mind. So with us, it was always building great friendships and bonding, and at the same time, living together like a family. And yes, sometimes each and every one of us would have 2 to 3 roommates in that one apartment. But to have that camaraderie of being involved, other than just musical theater, but being involved with your friends in so many great activities, especially for me, because I've been to Toronto, Ontario many of times. But at the same time, to live was a new experience for both Dorothy and I. And when we were there, we were right in the heart of the city. We were in the financial district of Toronto at the time. We were living in King and Niagara. You were living in Jarvis at the time. But Toronto has so much of that opportunity. Can you imagine what Toronto is like now? Back then, in 93, there was so much to do. It was like the New York of Canada, right?
Yeah.
So for us, we wanted to take advantage of everything. We wanted to record. We wanted to build a studio. We wanted to create our own music. We wanted to go out there in the public and perform with an actual boy group back in the day. And so that's how it evolved for me. And the experience that Dorothy had being surrounded with people who were just, true spirited artists, definitely inspired and motivated her as well. And the core of our friends that were hanging out with us. So our lifestyle was independent, but at the same time, this kind of catapulted into, what do I want to do now since I'm making the money? You know?
So let's point that part out,
Yeah.
because when you book a show, when you get casted, you can make a good amount from a paycheck. There's a difference between booking a show that's sitting in a city like Broadway, or for our case, Toronto,
Right.
compared to touring, which we both also have the experience in too. A lot of people like to tour because you get the per diem on top of your salary. So as young kids, after Toronto, for me, when I toured, I was making almost $2,000 a week at 20.
That's crazy.
But the thing is, back then, at 20 years old and you're making that much money, you're like, oh my God, what can I do with this?
So easy to shop.
It is
It's
so easy to, So I think knowing what I did then, now, it was of course, if it was my daughter in that position, of course, and not to say that my mom didn't give me the same advice, but it was you never know when this opportunity is going to come up again.
Exactly.
So be smart enough to save, because you don't know if there's another show that you'll be casted in. Because just because you get casted in one show doesn't guarantee you that you'll be casted in the next one that you audition for. And that's the tricky part about being a performer, okay? Because you can have the credentials, you can have the degree in this industry, but sometimes this industry isn't as what you think it would be. I have friends who've been in this industry for decades. I have a family member that has done, I think he has 8 Broadway shows under his belt. But he's always been consistent on auditioning, and that's the other thing. It's so it's always different for everybody, but it just depends on the situation.
Yeah.
So it can be discouraging, but it can also be encouraging, right? Depending on the situation, and the continuance of your strive, your passion for it.
Yeah.
And I think that if those who want to go in that direction of being in theater, being in musical theater, and they are continuing to struggle to find that role, don't quit, because you just never know. Our opportunities came knocking on our door very unexpectedly. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just the thing, is don't give up. Just don't give up, because and now these days performers have a way of utilizing their talents other places to be known and to grow,
Well, and
So-
it's
yeah.
falling back to what you had said. Being in the industry, you have that one opportunity, and that one opportunity, all of a sudden, you assume, okay, this is it. This is my life. This is my career. This is going to be for the long haul, right? When you get that one opportunity. But as to Dorothy's comment, when it's done and when your contract is up, then you're back to square one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's persistence. You got to stay persistent. You got to stay consistent with anything that you are auditioning to, in, because of course you'll never know when those opportunities are going to come. But at the same time, you have to accept the fact that it's a competitive market, and you'll have others who might be stronger as a vocalist or a dancer than you. Mm-hmm. So that lull of time should be productive. Like, you should be practicing, you should be rehearsing, you should be taking classes. If you're not really a strong dancer, take a dance class probably twice a week to enhance your, just your physique, but at the same time to be stronger in what you're trying to achieve as a dancer.
This thing that you guys have been talking about already, it opens up so many other conversations that can split off here.
Yeah.
And just thinking about some of the bigger ones that a lot of young people, 18, 19, or in your case, 17, when you started, might think about. Right. One, it's always going to be the money. They look at the paycheck. Is this going to pay me a lot of money? Another thing is, too, are the roles available for me? What I want to do? Do I have the wherewithal at 18 or 19 to think that this might be a good role for me if I travel with this one show? But does that role mean I'm good for this other show? And if not, how do I adjust to that? And then also, one thing that I wanted to get into here is trying to form relationships at that age, because you're trying to decide between your career and where it's taking you. But then also, if you're trying to develop relationships, which is what I wanted to get into with you guys specifically, is you've been married for what, 15? Correct me, how many years?
24 years.
24 years. Way off on that one. And you did this in an industry where pretty much, if you wanted to follow it, you may be in a show that says, hey, we're touring the US or we're touring Europe, and you might be in a show that's like, no, we have a dedication to perform in this city for 6 months. And how do you really balance that, and how do you really figure out where I should make the decision from? What are your thoughts about it, and how did you guys decide how to work with that?
Dude, Mike has studied us prior to this interview.
That's because he knows us.
I remember like the stories about Germany, which I want to get into that one.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, we have so many stories. I mean, okay, so the thing is, we're very our relationship is very unique because being married for that long. Okay, and prior to us being married, we were together. Our relationship started very quickly when we met each other in Toronto. So a month after we met each other at the meet and greet of Miss Saigon, a month later, we were already dating, right?
Yeah.
But the cool thing was, we had a group of friends that we always hung out with. So it was just never really us. It was all of us. But we were just more intimate with each other because we had that attraction. Our relationship lasted because throughout the years, just like every relationship, you have your roller coasters of differences, and you go through, especially at a very young age, there was moments where we weren't together. We broke up because we thought
it was difficult.
It was difficult because I was on tour, he was in Germany, and we were young, that we were like, we need to make sure that if what is it that we're missing out there? Whether it's meant for us to find out as individuals, or were we meant to be with someone else? Like, were we destined to be together? You know, we were dependent on each other in Toronto because we saw each other every day. But we truly had a relationship because we also had so much in common, you know. And again, our group of friends is what kept us tight too. So there was a lot between us in the sense of like...
Yeah, it was really challenging.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
especially, and I have to say, if there was any one show that definitely kept a longevity in our career, it was the Cameron McIntosh's production of Miss Saigon.
Yeah.
Because not only have we stuck around in Toronto, Mike, but we traveled all around the world doing this. You already know I've spent about 5 years of my life in Germany, you know, doing the engineer role. And so with that, it gave me a sense of, wow, I can open up my mind with this production, but at the same time, open up different things in my life, like learn different things in my life, especially a language and a culture that I would have never thought I would be a big part of, right? Going to Germany and having the opportunity and singing German and you know, just feeding in the German culture and building relationships with people out there in Germany. But with Dorothy and I, it was always a challenge because she started off with the first national tour. I was in Toronto, right? Just finishing off my contract with Miss Saigon. But at the same time, at that age, I was like always questioning what's Dot doing? Who is she hanging out with? You know, and it
those
ends up
insecurities
becoming...
come up, you
Yeah.
know, just because like, so for those to better understand, when there was like different companies of Miss Saigon happening because it was so popular. So there was the national tour, there was the European shows, there was I even experienced the second national tour. So it's, you know, when you're touring, you have different people that you're working with. You're creating newer relationships, friendships. He would come and visit me on tour. He actually proposed on tour.
North Carolina.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I was
North
in
Carolina was where it happened.
Yeah.
Of all places. Oh my gosh, that was a funny experience too. But and I would go visit him in Germany. So we got to know the people that we worked with, and but I think for us, we also just kept an open mind, right? Because we always just wanted to make sure that we supported one another, but we always wanted to have that understanding of we're friends first, because this is the only way we're going to support each other in an industry that is similar, or, you know, the same, but just in a different setting, you know? So,
It was hard though.
It was
Mike.
very
I mean,
hard.
it was very, very
long distance
challenging.
relationships are not easy
Yeah.
unless you have a trust, and unless you allow your significant other to enjoy the life that they have. If you're always questioning or bickering or have that insecurity of yourself, there's no way the relationship would have lasted as long
Yeah.
as it did while we were doing the things that we love to do.
And keep in mind, there was a time that Dorothy and I separated when we were in Miss Saigon, and it was just the way it was back then. Like, you know, she was so focused on her work, she was so focused on traveling, and we kind of made a pact that, you know, if it's meant to be, we'll reunite again. But let's be realistic here. You're traveling miles away, and I'm still in Toronto doing a few off-Broadway shows here, working on my music here, just caught up with the people who were in Miss Saigon, who have ventured with me in this production company of creating music and recording. So our life started, you know, splitting apart, and we understood that, but we also accepted the fact that, okay, if we take a break, you know, and one day, if ever we meet again, I'm sure our relationship is going to grow stronger.
Well, here's one thing I wanted to ask you regarding how you guys grew up and sort of expectations. I mean, the world has changed now just in the 20 or 30
Right.
years since you guys have been doing this. You know, like Dorothy, when you were like in your early 20s and you were thinking you were following this career and then you guys decided to get engaged. But before that, were you ever, either did you get pressure or were you telling yourself, you know, maybe I should, you know, the parents want me to get married and have kids now or whatever. And did that ever play a role when you were trying to follow your career? Were you getting pressure from either outside family or maybe even in talking to yourself, like, is this what I want to do or should I do this? How are you balancing that? I think it's something that a lot of young girls today are trying to figure out as they follow their career. It's like, you know, how do I process that information? So you have a good perspective on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate that my family never pressured me on this is how it should go, other than, well, I think you should go in the medical field, or, you know, the traditions of what the success would be. But to start a family, to go in that direction because of the age that I was at and not continuing with an education, I really was lucky that my mom never really pressured me in the sense of like, well, when are you going to give me grandbabies? When are you going to, you know what I mean? Like, that was never a question in my household. Whereas some Asian families definitely do, and I totally understand. But I guess the ultimate thing on my end, and for me, I continue this, even though I have structure in my life now, I have priorities in my life now, I still have a free spirit in the sense of just kind of putting my faith out there of, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what my destination is, or, you know, what is meant to be for me. So I kind of just put that up in the air to see how it develops. So my younger years, when I was, 20 and realized, okay, is that what it's supposed to be like? It never really was a question because I was surrounded by people who didn't have that mentality yet, you know? A lot of performers, when they, especially the ones that I worked with, not a lot of them were married yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so did they have relationships? Yes. Were some of their spouses on tour with them? Sometimes. So for me, there wasn't really examples of like, this is how it should be, you know? But I was surrounded by people who were family. Some of them traveled with their kids, you know? So I had the ability to grow up with families and watch their kids grow, or even offer to take care of their kids, you know? So that was a really cool experience in the sense of remembering what my family background was like and how I grew up in an Asian family, you know?
Right.
But then again, I feel like I continue to grow up in an Asian family because of the show is based with a bunch of Asians.
The way to put it, yeah.
Yes. But no, it was never a pressure for me. Now, for those who feel that, it's really under your control. I have friends that have been in the industry who have raised their families and still continue to be in the industry and successful. But
Still
again,
today.
Yeah. But it is the understanding of both spouses of, I support you in this and you support me in this. We make it work and try to still have a normal type of lifestyle for our kids' sake, right? So I think for those in the age of like trying to figure out, well, am I supposed to follow this path because this is how my family expects me? Like at this age, I should have graduated already. This age, I have to be married. This age, I have to have a family. You're in control of it, you know, and there's always time. I feel like get yourself situated and do what you need to do now for yourself.
Before you can settle down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and hopefully you have that significant other that supports you in what you do and doesn't question what it should be like for us. I mean, have that common understanding of that talk of, do we want family? Do we want kids? How is this going to work? And I think, like us, we have that open communication, you know. We only have one child. We wish we had more, but I think the way that we had our life, like before, when we got married, we still waited like 6 years to even have our daughter because we weren't done with enjoying us still in the industry. And that's hard to balance too, because like it was said earlier, you don't know what other opportunities you have in this industry. You just continue to keep auditioning and growing as an artist. You know, for him, he was working on his music, you know, but I never questioned, when are we going to have kids? When are we going to settle down? It was never a question for us. I think it would just develop the way it did organically.
Yeah.
And I think that is the advice I would probably say to those young adults who are thriving in the industry and picture themselves saying, well, I wish I had that normal life to have a family, because whether it is other friends starting their careers and their families and you're kind of left behind, it's like, dude, then be left behind. It's okay, because you have so much time to enjoy everything else. Do what you need to do for yourself first. And if it means being in that spotlight for you in this industry, then do it, you know, do that, because you'll have the support. You'll know when it's right to transition to being a parent, transition to doing something different, whether it's still in the industry or not. But I think now that I know, it's like, do what you got to do, especially in this industry, because you never know. You never know.
But the key word, though, Mike, is support. You know, if you don't have the support from your significant other and you have established a relationship and they think differently of what you're doing, then it's honestly never going to work out.
Yeah.
So if you're
Good
confident,
point there.
If you're confident with the relationship, and regardless of how preoccupied and engulfed you are in your work, just as long as you have your significant other having your back, that's all that matters. You know, whether it's distance or whether you're in the same town, but yet doing two different shows, or you're just artists involved in so many different projects. As long as you have that support, that's all that matters. And then it will come together later down the line in the future.
Yeah, and that comes with your parents too. You know, parents, they just want what's best for their kids. And I don't know, maybe there's some parents who use their kids as, you know, platforms to shine, and that's their prerogative. But I think for that individual, it's like, if you have the talent and you know that you are a dime a dozen, then just do your thing, because you will have the opportunity of somebody knocking on your door saying, I saw you in this, and I think you would be good for this.
Mm-hmm. Well, what got you guys to transition? Because as your careers developed in Broadway and all the shows, what made you transition, you especially, Johann, to saying music is where I want to focus on. That's my talent. That's the road that I want to take control of. Where did you first get that inkling of? And then you, Dorothy, when you decided, you know, it was a great career, I'm transitioning to something else. How did you guys balance all that?
Well, I was completely motivated already while being in Miss Saigon. I was working with, you know, two amazing and talented individuals, Sam Geronco and Romeo Candido at the time. And we were just bouncing, you know, ideas off of each other, and harmonies, and really discussing matters of what's our influence in the R&B scene. So instead of just talking about it, why don't we do it? And from that point forward, I remember, you know, Sam had his own little studio set. Romeo had his own studio set. So we were always involved after work. After a show, we were always writing. We were always, you know, recording original music. We collaborated with some great producers back in the day that inspired us. So from that point forward, it moved, you know, into, this is our plan. This is the game plan after Miss Saigon. No matter how long we're going to stay in Miss Saigon, this is exactly what we intend to do. And it grew to two of our other brothers, Bobby Geronco and Jason Camat, who's my brother. And it it evolved into this amazing machine of artists who sound very soulful and who are unconventional in terms of what they wanted to do as artists. They didn't want to be like anybody else. And we wanted to have a different sound. And we were studying and doing as much research as possible to incorporate that sound until the end of, our opportunities doing musical theater. It just evolved into doing more writing projects, recording projects, music videos. And it's just that common life of being an inspired artist, you know what I mean? And so with me, that's exactly how I continued on, was just listening to new artists coming of age and then getting ideas to create my own sound, my own vocal take in terms of soulful music and R&B. And it worked fantastically, having the relationship with these amazing men who always inspired me to do the things that I need to do to become a well-rounded, singer. And still to this day, I'm always turning to them for advice. We still do projects together. It's given me an opportunity to open doors of opportunity for myself, collaborating with different producers, different artists here in the Bay Area, and of course out in the East Coast. So yeah, it was just that moment of always staying hands-on musically and creatively while I was doing the show.
So when you're doing this, how do you consistently stay motivated? Because like we talked about earlier, this kind of career, unless you're just that unicorn diamond in the rough person that just gets discovered by Usher one day and now you've taken off like Justin Bieber and everything's like you're on a pedestal. For most artists, it's a long grind to get your talent down, to get your information out there, to get your name out there. So how do you process that when you're going through days where you easily probably could have said, this isn't worth it anymore, I should go do this job here and make a stable salary and then continue out my life there? How are you dealing with all that?
Just staying productive, honestly, in many different directions of being an artist, whether it's going to be performing on stage, getting as many gigs as possible. Social media management is a big factor, especially in this generation today. And just keep listening to music. Not necessarily one demographic. You want to be able to listen to different types of artists who inspire you in more of a songwriting level, because now it's about songwriting. It's about getting your stamp of who you are in the industry. And it's, ever so competitive. So you have to consider that. What is it? And that's something that Dorothy and I had talked about while coming here. It's like, how do we keep consistent? Well, part of keeping consistent is going out there, recording, build those collaborations, put yourself out in social media, put your posts out in terms of like how you feel about the music industry today and how's that elevated, your sense of motivation. Introducing the new singles that are coming out, which has been a blessing for me, because I've been collaborating with so many great Bay Area artists and producers that it's built this continuity of opportunity. And, I want to keep that maintained for as long as I can, both in the performing level and both in home, recording sessions. Building projects is the only way where you're going to build that momentum. And if you just sit down hoping that there's going to be something offered on a silver platter, then you're probably crazy, because it takes a lot of hard work to get your name out there.
Exactly. And then, Dorothy, how are you supporting Johann doing this? Because this is a long grind, and there are days where maybe the paychecks that are coming in just, it can be a struggle some days. So do you have any advice for spouses or people who are supporting somebody else who's doing a similar industry where how do you actually get your stuff out there, and how do you support them in doing that when, you may say, hey, I got bills to pay, or we have bills to pay, or where is this going, or you're never home to see, whatever it is. How do you process all that?
Yeah, so back in the day when we were younger, and he had the opportunity here in the Bay Area with the gentleman that he had mentioned, that was a huge concern, you know, because we didn't have the jobs that we have now, where we are we're comfortable to enjoy doing what we're doing now. So back then it was hard. It was very, you know, here and there of like, okay, I can only support so much because I can't be the one paying the bills. Mm-hmm. So it had to deal with a lot of patience, definitely. But because music was always, as we said, in our background, I never once told him, you need to stop and do something that needs to help us. There was always that support on my end saying, how can we make this work? You know, because I can't imagine him stopping what he loves to do. And he would never do the same for me. He would never say, you need to not do that anymore. You know, if we saw a passion that we love to do as individuals, we always made it a point to support one another. Didn't matter anything else. And I think now looking back, I'm glad that we continued to support that decision. And because of that, this came out of it, where now he can still continue to record, but it's not about making the money off of it.
Right.
It's about, as an artist, there's so much that I want to utilize in my talent, not just an outlet, but just to continue to stay creative. So for me as a performer, how could I say, stop doing what you're doing? I think that would be more of a selfish thing, and realize that I don't want him to continue to be the artist that he is. I married him for that, you know, so it kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to ask that because, and you guys know, we live in Silicon Valley, and tech jobs around here, with how much these salaries pay at Google and Facebook, if you're in the right spot, it can be very easy for people to say, well, I need to stay in this job because it pays the bills. I have this nice house. I have the family. So I'll just deal with the job that I have now because it pays the bills. And for them to be able to say, I wish I could go do what I really want to do, but I know if I do that, then, you know, I may not be making a lot of money. So they just don't even really process that. And for you to be able to say that I've still wanted to follow my passion, what I really wanted to do, and that because you guys are on the same page, you're able to communicate about how your life is going to be. Whereas if you were somebody that said, no, you need to go make this amount of money. I don't care if you work at Google or if you work as, you know, a sanitation worker, we need the money for the family. And it puts you in a spot to say, am I giving up on my future, my career, what I really want to do just to make the money? And a lot of people just say, you know, it's easier for me just to get the paycheck that I need to make the family work, instead of doing what I really want to do. And that might be at the heart of why so many people, there's a lot of reasons, but why a lot of people are stressed out, because maybe they're stuck somewhere because of the cogs that are going and the way the life is going, and they just don't really have the opportunity to explore what they really want to do. And they kind of feel like they don't have control over what they're doing. They're just sort of caught up in the machine, and this is where it's going. And my family loves it, but deep down it's like, am I really doing what I really want to do? And to see you guys actually be able to figure out a way through it is inspiring for me, and I'm sure it's inspiring for a lot of people who do watch or hear this, that you can still follow what you want to do. If you're both on the same page, you can work together to make sure the finances work. You can make sure that the people do, that you both have the time to go and pursue what you want to do, so that you ultimately end up happier in a relationship. I mean, you're not that much older than me, and you're in great shape, both of you.
Thank you.
You know, I see people who are younger than me, and they're balding, and then they're like, the
like,
stress on the face.
What happened to you?
Exactly. And then you sort of ask them, you're like, oh, you're just following the grind. Like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. What am I going to do? So you need to, you know, as an individual, I think you need to step back and reassess your life at that point and figure out how to make it work where you can still do the grind, but have the ability to have the time to do what you love to do. Even if it's like an hour a day, you know, 2 hours a week, you make that work and then you build it. So there was a point where he wasn't recording anymore, and that was when COVID happened, right? And I had touched base with him. I'm like, we're on lockdown. You need to do something.
Yeah, this is the best time.
This is the best time. Take out your equipment. Just start, reach out to your connections. What can you do as an artist to use this as an outlet? Because this is a perfect time to be creative and to speak your mind about what's going on. And I think it would be healthy for you and for our relationship to utilize that platform. And that's where it all kind of began to where he is now, right? And so I see this success unfold to where we are during this present time. And because it wasn't, well, I got to do it to get money for it, it was more of like, okay, well, let me take baby steps in trying to see what this can become. And he reached out to the right people, and the ones who supported him, saying, yeah, let's just collaborate. And that was probably the best thing.
Let's make one thing clear. As an artist, I don't know how everybody else thinks when they're an ongoing artist and they're trying to put their name out there. But for me, it's all about the music. It's not about the money, right? I'm inspired each and every single day listening to all these various artists who are out there, whether they're in social media or whether they're on the radio station. I'm open to listening to anybody, right, in the music industry. And, of course, our daughter, because she's much more knowledgeable in terms of today's generation of music. So we like to pick her brain, because at our age, it's kind of like, we got to get with the times. Technologically, the style, the culture of today, and the outlets that could help put our name out there. And if we're not technically savvy, well, guess who we turn to? Our daughter.
You have no idea. I mean, you're definitely speaking truth on that one. By the way, anybody who's watching or listening, if you like the show, please like it and subscribe to the channel so you can continue getting updates on this. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can probably figure out now that the reason why Johann is wearing his headphones that way is because this is somebody who's in the studio a lot. Yeah. And this is how you wear them, where I only do this for the show, so this is how I'm used to it.
You're absolutely right.
Imagine wearing that for 7 or 8 hours. I can see why you probably would do this more. Maybe you just have more control over it. But going back to what you were saying about that and the technology available today, how do you guys even process the social media, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, well, Twitter's a whole different story, but this is something that a lot of artists are doing now. And to see these young kids, 10, 11, 12 years old, that make these dance videos on TikTok, we won't get into how they do their algorithm, but to see them do that and as a way to express themselves, like how do you use that technology there and try to use it to better a brand when you're speaking to a lot of young kids who their attention span is like half of a second? If it doesn't catch them there, then they're not even paying attention.
Well, to be honest with you, Mike, I'm still a sponge trying to absorb as much knowledge in social media management. I mean, I'm an example of a person who's like, I can't get on social media every single day. I don't even know where to begin in terms of posting. But I'm always researching. I'm always asking questions. I'm that person who will want to get other people's suggestions and recommendations in terms of social media. But it is motivating because you have various types of people with various types of talents that will put themselves out there, and they're getting thousands and thousands of views, even if it's the most minuscule post of like, oh, look at my dog just jumping up and down. Guess what? It's getting 471,000 views. How do you do that, right? And as to what you had said, we will never know what the algorithm is, but the bottom line is that for somebody my age who's still in the scene and who still believes that, he's got the chops and could hang with any hip hop artist or R&B artist, I still am a person who's like humbled and who bears his humility because I don't know what's out there the way a lot of the younger generation does. So I turn to them for more of that knowledge and to help me get through in putting my name out there in social media. but it's competitive and it's hard work. I mean, at least for me, there's so much to learn about it, and I'm still taking baby steps.
Well, one thing with that is because these young kids nowadays are growing up with it, where we didn't have it until we were in our 20s and we were still figuring the whole thing out.
Absolutely not.
Now they're 11, 12 years old and they're already on all these social media platforms. One thing with artists specifically, like if you look at the bigger names like, Kanye or whatever, all these artists that are well-known, Drake,
right?
And these young kids, especially like these young boys who want to emulate them and say that I want his lifestyle, I want the cars, the women, the money, the whatever, the fame. Right. How do you really get the message out there to the young kids that, hey, I know you see the lifestyle on stage, but that behind the scenes, even if you're making a lot of money, this is how the industry actually works. This is what you don't know about the big artists and the record labels and who they sign with and how much control maybe that these companies or corporations have over the individual artist. Can you kind of elaborate on that and maybe why that might not be something that you would pursue, or would you pursue because it is a bigger outreach?
Again, it's not really within my thought process because I just go every single day recording and building momentum with other people who can put my name out there. But it is a very capitalizing environment. And to even get to where I'm at this point in time still is questionable. Obviously now the Asian market is more marketable out there, especially when it comes to different types of demographic of music. But I think for me, it's just a matter of keeping momentum in what you're doing, keeping with the times, keeping with the style, and really accepting constructive criticism. I think that is one of the biggest factors. Sometimes it's hard to accept what it is that they're looking for. I'm one who's stubborn. So I'll listen to music and I'm like, wow, that sounds exactly like another Bruno Mars sound, or it sounds just like Drake. Why is somebody rapping and having the same tone the way Drake raps, But the bottom line is it's formula. You have to think about what the formula is and what's lucrative upon global revenue. And maybe the younger generation doesn't see it that way, and they already know the type of algorithm, they know the type of data analytics that people are looking for. So they match themselves with exactly their expectations. How do they do it? It's still a mystery to me. And I'm learning every single day. But overall, you gotta have tough skin in this industry, right? And it's about, if you're gonna be one to capitalize, then you gotta be, tunnel visioned with that. And how is that gonna work? With different types of facets. You gotta know your marketing. You gotta know exactly what sound people are going to enjoy and people are gonna be following. You got to know exactly the type of examples based upon hooks, catchy phrases that people are drawn to these days. And you hear these types of examples with various types of artists who are out there, whether they're hip hop, R&B, or pop, right? People are emulating one particular sound or one particular jargon when they're singing their choruses or their verses or even ad-libbing that people catch on to, that the public catches on to. And I think that's what, in my eyes, incorporates more following, more views, more listens.
Well, that's a good point, because what age would you say you were at where you realized that I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this because I want to pursue this career and see it grow organically. It's hard to tell a young 18, 19, 20-year-old who may have talent in the industry to not just do what the trends are, because that's the quickest way to get noticed. It's the quickest way to get money. So at what age did you say, I could do that if I wanted to play the game, but really I want to kind of follow my own path? When did that sort of click in your head?
I'm probably thinking late 20s, early 30s is when I started to realize that I kind of wanted to venture off and incorporate my own style of sound without thinking too much about the money grind of it
Gotcha.
all. I think it was more spreading the message so that people appreciate the music that I do And not only that, they enjoy what I represent, you know, as an Asian artist, who I represent in my culture, and the type of you know, definition of music that I'm providing out there, because it's different, it's unique. I started really crossing over into that probably when I was 28, like 28, 30 years old.
Gotcha.
Right, Dot?
I think so.
Yeah, like without having to think too much about, I want to be signed to a label.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I want to have this advance of at least $500,000, right, to work my own music. I started to think realistically upon who I am as an artist, and what can possibly be for me realistically at my late 20s, for sure.
Yeah, and I think also with kind of piggybacking on what he was saying about those who want that lifestyle, I think for the younger generation that is using these platforms to want to be the next Drake, it's like, if you really want to be the next Drake, then do your research. Like, think about what he struggled to get to where he's at, because there's a lot that isn't presented. It's just their success that you see, right? But you don't know the struggles that Drake went through, Kanye went through to get to where they're at now, and how financially stable they are, or even what their stability is now. There's an artist, Toni Braxton, who was extremely successful, and then she went through bankruptcy. Do these kids know that? No, right? It's like they don't know the struggles, the background of it. So I would suggest, do your research of the artist that you think that you want to be, or the artist you want to be, right? Because that will portray what your success is going to be in the future, depending on how you want to roll with it, what you want to do. And then, of course, with Johann saying I had to develop my own sound, and it wasn't about the money. I think that's the biggest thing. The success will come.
Exactly.
Don't think about how much money you're going to make with the talent you have, and be careful of how you think that way, because somebody who has that mentality can take you, create a success, and destroy you. This industry can be amazing, but like every industry, it can also have some turmoil.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to be smart about the success that you want to be in a performer's industry. You have to remember that you're always in control of it, always. And if you have that mentality, your success will blossom. It will flourish the way you might not expect it to be.
And when you know that there's going to be possible recognition, the bottom line is, you know, when that's going to happen, make sure that you own 100% of your rights. Like,
Exactly.
Oh, if you do,
it's so easy. It's so easy for somebody else to license your music. It's so easy these days, but you've got to recognize that, you know, this is the reality, and people can sometimes be crooked in the industry. The one big factor in terms of why this could potentially be successful is your work. It's your product. It's all the hard hours that you've worked in the studio from 12 p.m. all the way to like 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, that's hustle. Everybody says it's a grind, right, to get your work out there. It's absolutely true. It's 100% true.
It is nights of not sleeping, right? It is sacrifices. You pull yourself away. It is, you know, saying, oh, I can't make it to this because I have to do this project. I mean, there was times when he would turn down gigs because he said, I have a deadline. I have to, you know, it's because, and it wasn't about, you know, it was more in the sense of like, I already told the producer that I would get this done, and I want to make sure that I am loyal to them about it, right? Because when you're working with somebody else, it's their time too.
Yeah.
So you have to respect that. That's another word, respect. Have respect in the industry. Have respect for yourself. Have respect for others that you're working with, because that's how you get your foot in the door.
Well,
And that's the opportunities.
Another thing too is understand the logistics, right? If you are going to be collaborating with a producer and 2 other artists, make sure that you all come together cohesively and understand what those splits are going to be. Not like one person is getting 80%, you're only getting 20%.
Yeah.
Right? That's why there's so many associations like ASCAP, BMI, SOCAN, that represent the core of artists, so that when you generate those splits, it will split automatically divided into what was agreed upon within the party.
One thing that I've heard from you, and this is something that we were talking to Joey about earlier. By the way, there are daughters in the back of the studio here. So if you see us looking, there she is.
Shout out to Joey.
Is that when we were younger in our 20s, so this is going back into like late 90s, early 2000s time there.
Right.
We still had a different mindset before social media came up. You still thought that by the time you graduated college-ish, around 23 years old, that's when your life's supposed to take off. You're supposed to get this big salary job. You're supposed to, this is when you, what was that TV show, Sex and the City, that came out around that same time, that once you go, you're going to go to the big city, you're going to make it, get this great career, and then life's going to go on from there. And then what we're talking about now, and what we were telling her, is that I didn't figure my act out till I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. And same thing for you, when it sort of clicked that this is an industry that it can be cutthroat. I know my style of music, and it really is not about money at this point. It's really about putting out the product that I want to push out there.
Right.
But if you were 21, it's so easy, or 19, to chase the money, to chase the fame, because especially I think for guys, it's a little bit different.
Right.
At that age, it's kind of, you want the flash, you want that attention, because that's how you get the respect from other guys. The attention from women is how much you can sort of put that image out there. We get into our late 20s and early 30s, things start to change. I don't need the big expensive car anymore. That's a lot of maintenance, a lot of payments.
Right.
Oh, actually, you know what? Maybe it doesn't really matter if I'm signed to that big bad boy label or whatever it is, because they have a lot of control over what I produce, and they take a lot of the revenue. How much I get is actually about this much.
Yeah.
Maybe it is about taking time to develop yourself. And I just see so many people in their 20s doing the same thing that I did. It's just worse for them, because everybody has a degree now. So how do you stand out?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be on TikTok or whatever. So how do you stand out from the rest of the crowd? And you realize as you develop your skills over time and that patience, then when you get into your late 20s, early 30s, that's when you start to shine. It's like the idea of compound interest. You put money away now and you just don't see it move. All of a sudden it goes up slowly, and then it starts to really pick up 10, 15 years later.
Right.
When they tell you, hey, invest in your 401k, it's going to grow, but you watch it for 5 years, like, it's not doing anything. They lied to me the whole time. And then 15 years later, like, oh, there's that big jump.
Yeah.
All that time and investment. So the patience and the whole idea of figuring out what you want comes later in life.
Yeah.
It's hard. The industry, you can either be recognized real easily, real fast, and get work every opportunity. And then there's, times when it's slow and it doesn't happen. I think you just have to keep an open mind. If you're going to continue and thrive in this industry, be humble, really, right? Because, and be grateful and thankful for the work that you get, and that you're able to utilize your talent and to share your talent. I think that's what a lot of artists forget sometimes. You are blessed with a talent, so share it, okay? And remember that talent can be automatically taken away. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you are in the moment of your success, let's say it's the success now, enjoy every minute of it.
Yep.
Okay. Because like anything, it can be taken away, or this might be your only success of it, right? And I would say, have something to fall back on, whether or not it is something that you choose to continue with later down the line, but at least you have something to fall back on to say, okay, if I'm not getting work right now as, an actress, I could just do this for now. But don't forget to continue to stay on top of it. I think with this industry too, because there's so many young artists that are being recognized and getting the roles, I mean, when I'm watching, like I watch the Golden Globes and I'm like, I don't know who that artist is. I don't know who that actress. I don't have access to that stream to watch their show, They're always like they're looking for new faces all the time in this industry, rightfully so, right? But if you want to continue in this industry, then you need to continue to put yourself out there, but always remember to have something to fall back on.
Yeah, but at the same time, accepting the generation's expectations today, because it's not, we have to remember this is not 1993 anymore, right? This is not back when we were working in Bloomingdale's,
It's
right?
not Vanilla Ice days
No,
anymore.
it's not. I mean, there is so many expectations within this industry, whether you're an actor, whether you're a musician, it becomes cutthroat, and you just have to accept the fact that, okay, if you're going to put yourself out there, consider those things, consider those factors, and try it out. If you don't know, then somebody in your family, some close friends will know how to put yourself out there in social media. I've been quite humbled, asking questions, and yes, I would, be made fun of being, oh, you don't know how to use Instagram? Dorothy does that all the time with me, but the bottom line is, how will you know if you don't take other people's advice, or if you don't ask? You'll never know if you don't ask. And so I've been quite humbled by asking Joey, and asking Dorothy how to take advantage of social media as an artist, as somebody who's trying to get their projects out there. But you have to, that's absolutely right, Dot. You have to be humbled of everything that you do, because you've got this gift, you've got this voice, and you want to spread this message. And there's a higher power who's giving you the opportunity to do that. Now go out there and do it. Where do you start off with? It starts with the music, and it starts with your passion. Once you can, flaunt your passion to the public, whoever those 100 people or 1 million people will be, that's up to you to manifest and decide how many of those followers would come through. But at the end of the day, you always have to be humble with the type of music that you're putting out, and spreading positive messages rather than just sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
The whole Metallica, not Metallica,
gosh.
was it Motley Crue?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, don't get us wrong. We had our moments of partying, when we were younger. We remember coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning, sleeping
were the
until
days.
like 2 in the afternoon.
Gosh, that doesn't even exist
Nope.
with us anymore.
Yeah, and then coming back at, waking up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and then saying, okay, well, we got to get ready for the show, and then having your first meal of the day, and then working from 8 to 11, and then partying again. It's like, it was our routine when we were younger. There was memorable moments. There was also scary moments, but luckily we survived. And the things that we share to our daughter, in the sense of like what it was like, because she asks us every once in a while, what was that experience like? What was it? Because for her, she lived a normal family life, okay, compared to what we lived in her age. So her curiosity of how we came about and how we succeeded now, there's a huge difference, and we share certain experiences with her so that she understands where we're coming from, but also how we function as a couple, what got us to this point, so all of that plays into what our experience was for her. But yeah, I think for those young kids who are developing in the industry and have a better understanding of it, I think just keep an open mind of what you're learning, and also don't be afraid to collaborate and support one another. That's the other thing I think that kind of is missing in today's generation when it comes to the industry, right? When you're in the family of the industry, remember to respect one another, but also support one another, because you never know if the support you have from that person might be also an opportunity for another job.
Spot on.
You know, so and that's something that you have to consider. Don't be selfish. Don't be like, well, I'm better than her, or oh, that person has the it factor, so I'll never be like them. It's like,
don't flip off the director, walk off stage and say
yeah.
you suck, and then next thing you know, they're directing the play that you want to be in, and it's like, hey.
Surprisingly enough, there are people who are jaded like that, who feel they're entitled to make comments like that. With us, again, even if it's not within the circle of our family, throughout the years, yes, there was a lot of struggle, right, within the entertainment industry and what reality was. And coming out here to the Bay Area, I got the taste of reality, right? And so part of that was acceptance, was accepting the fact that, hey, you're going to have to settle for a 9-to-5 job.
Unpack that reality a little bit more, because that's a good point that you brought up about how this is where the industry was, where I'm at. I come over here to the Bay Area, and then sort of life hits me in the face. What does that really mean?
I'm very fortunate. I'm really fortunate that at least I had the opportunity to get a taste of reality. But most importantly, Dorothy and I are really fortunate of establishing some great friendship. Coming here, I started off working in retail, working in Bloomingdale's, and then growing in Bloomingdale's, like from being in Stanford to the city, with you. And so we grew together, right? Seeing our relationship blossom to building relationships with other people that worked in that corporation. And to have that support, because they knew I was a musician, right? And so with that, I was fortunate of establishing great friends that are still close with us today, even if we haven't seen each other for 10 years. Mike, it's like we've seen each other yesterday.
I want to also add in that sense, so people understand our struggle. Joey was a baby, and because we passed up an opportunity that could have been a success for us, decided to come back to California. I'm from California. Okay, I don't think I mentioned that in this interview, but I'm from California. So coming back to the Bay, it was never in our plans, honestly. We wanted to stay in the East Coast, but we were brought back to California for a project on Johann's end that didn't develop the way we thought it would. So we were forced to figure out, okay, well, I think the word would be survive. How are we going to survive, right?
Right.
As a couple, as a young couple that doesn't have any education background, like we didn't have degrees.
You were about 25, 26
That's
at the time?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a newborn.
And a newborn.
Yes. Wow. So it's like, okay, so I think retail at that point was the easiest way to get a paycheck while trying to figure out what are we going to do to survive and put food on the table, keep a roof over our heads, right? So that was our struggles. And it was a struggle for a lot of years. And people who've grown with us when we moved back know what kind of struggles we went through. And I think the great thing about our family, our extended family, meaning not just blood related, but also friends and those that we've met throughout the years that still remains friends with us, they've always supported us.
Always.
I don't think there's ever been a time that we've lived our lives in California where we gone through our list of friends to ever say, oh, we're no longer friends with them. Like, we've never eliminated people out of our lives. I think we haven't talked for a while, but when we reunite, it's like the best the best thing in our lives, because we always remembered, you were part of our lives once, right? Throughout our years of struggle. And so therefore you are part of our success now. Mm-hmm. That's how I see it, right? So,
and that's for each and every one of us,
Yeah.
we're all a substance of examples now of what we're doing. We came, even before going to Bloomingdale's, we really didn't know what we were doing in each other's lives. But of course, having the opportunities in working in retail, I feel, has definitely built growth of responsibility, of just manning up, of being realistic, but also, just being humble. That sometimes you have an opportunity where you get a gig that pays you 6 figures, and then all of a sudden, guess what? Your contract is done, and this is exactly what you have to settle. But we're blessed to have that opportunity. But if there is one thing that is ever so genuine with both Dorothy and I, it's how we establish our friendships with people. Dorothy is a big example because, she's had a core of friends for so many years, and she is one who always stays consistent in keeping in touch. Mm-hmm. Always stays consistent. And that's one thing that I admire about her, is that she has established great relationships with those who have supported her along the way, whether it was good or bad times. She will never, ever forget the core friendship that she has with each and every one of the people that she's associated with throughout the years. So it's about genuine friendship and the support that they reciprocate back to you, because it keeps us going. It keeps us complete.
Yeah. And because I grew up in a big family, even though I'm an only child, but I always appreciate the people that are in my life from childhood till now, or even if I've met you like 3 months ago, I always learn from them, because you always have to learn something new, right? So, and if you're going to learn something new, you can learn from the people that you trust and that you create friends with, because you just never know.
That's true.
But I always tell that to Johann, and I always tell that to Joey. When you establish your friends, the true ones that stick with you for X amount of years, they're the ones that will never judge you. They're the ones that will always support you. And luckily, I've always had those friends in my life that I can go to, whether I haven't talked to them in years, and they will always have their door open. Mm-hmm. So it's really comforting to know.
And this is an example for many of the younger generation today, because of course they yearn for that affection. They yearn for people to accept them. And I just want to pass this over to many of those of my daughter's age, including my daughter, that you don't need a slew of friends to accept you. As long as you have 1 or 2 friends who support you 150% and who has your back and appreciates you genuinely for who you are, that's all that matters, And I think that is one thing that Dorothy and I always, bring up that subject up to our daughter, is that, I know that it gets tough when you don't have a clique of friends who want to follow you or who appreciate you. But guess what? You have 2 of the most genuine individuals who are, who definitely have values, who have morals, and who care.
And who like you unconditional, has an unconditional
because
friendship.
of who you are.
Because of
who you are.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think for us, so being a performer, obviously you play different roles. So the genuine of your own being is the truthfulness of what a relationship can develop into.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so true.
So it's like, for me, I've always told Johann, I can't be fake. I just can't. And if I have to be fake towards somebody, then forget it. I can't be in the room with them, because that's not me. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very genuine.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
It can be very obvious if, you know, so be your true self.
And we're not drawn to people like that.
Oh,
which
I
is,
can't.
you know,
I can't.
Well, that's good. I mean, this is good advice to pass on to the younger generation. I want to get into what you're doing now in your project, but I want to ask you first, Dorothy, because I'm not really sure. Are you still active in the performing industry, or you pretty much have hung up the acting cleats, if you will, and said, okay, I'm doing something different? How have you transitioned with that?
Yeah. So I'm no longer a dancer. Dancing was in my background for so many years. I was dancing since I was 3, and unfortunately, due to a skiing accident, it limited me to continue to not necessarily be the dancer that I wanted to be, but as a performer, a well-rounded performer, you definitely had to have a strong background, as we noted in the beginning. So I hung up my dancing shoes a while back, but the singing part of my performing background, I still do. So occasionally I'll sing with the bands that Johann sings with, given opportunities from our friends who, you know, created their own band. So that gives me a platform to continue to utilize my talent. So that is where I still continue to perform. But when it comes to theater, doing ensemble work, I can't say yet that I've hung up my shoes with that. That still comes up every once in a while to, you know, think of like, can I still do that? I know I still can, but again, you think about like, well, who am I going to be up against if I were to go for an audition, right?
Do it.
But I think the way I kind of look at it now is I can be a mentor to those who want to go into the industry. So I look at more in the sense of, if you want advice from a professional, I can be that. And that's how I can utilize my performing skills to help the next generation of like how to best be that unique performer to stand out. That I can do. But I exercise my performance if I have the opportunity. And I'm teaching myself to say yes more than to shy back and say, no, it's not. No, not. You know?
Say that again.
He encourages me more because he knows the potential that I have. Because he's the one, my family hears me at home. Mm-hmm. So he pushes me more and says, why don't you do it? And it's like, oh.
I mean, you have that talent still within you. It doesn't go away. And it would, I mean, honestly, if you try to just subdue it all the way and say that's my whole life, I'm done with it, you'd probably still have that itch somewhere else. And if you don't actually fulfill it, you know, through your talents that you've had, and then it can lead you into a darker path, which nobody wants to be in, you know?
Right.
So to be able to have that support to say, you know what, I'm still going to go out there and perform this way, or I still want to go and give back to the younger generation in a different way. Maybe I don't travel with whatever the show is like I used to, but I can still do things another way and still have that balance in your life between being a mother, a wife, and still a performer and doing everything else that you do normally. You still have that with you. So that's a big thing.
Yeah. Right. And here's the thing. It is very easy for a performer to go into a dark place if you haven't gotten the opportunity or haven't worked in such a long time. Okay. So for me, during COVID, what I actually did was I turned to the music ministry in my church, and I utilized my talent that way. You don't have to have a huge stage to continue to sing or to show off your talents or to share your talents in that sense. Mm-hmm. Just find somewhere, a community that is similar, and that's what I did. And I'm extremely content with that. I love it. It gives me the opportunity to meet new people, to sing the music that I love to sing, to keep exercising my voice. And that's really what it is, you know? So at the age that I'm at, I don't have to be the performer that I used to be back in the day to be able to continue the success with my music. I am not a creative writer like my husband. that is his expertise, and I support him on that because he's very unique at what he does. And what he does ask of me, though, is like, how does this sound? What do you think? Like, we work well together in the sense of him sharing, like, me being his best critic, right? I think that's where I come in to help assist him in the industry. Because he knows my performing level. He knows how I critique a performer, a sound. I still can watch these YouTube videos, and we'll talk about it. We'll have discussions of like, what do you like about this artist? There's this one specific recording artist by the name of Yeba that we both fell in love with. And it's like, oh my gosh, she is truly amazing.
Just a natural talent,
Yes.
vocally.
So we'll have these deep discussions and talk about artists that we find and we'll just dissect their work, right?
Bottom line.
But we
Jesus.
have great discussions about it because as performers, it's still something that we do. So
Yeah.
I think with that being said, I have found other outlets to utilize my talents.
That's
There you
excellent.
go.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
So now, Johann, so talk about specifically your latest album that came out and sort of what your sort of kind of like the vision that you have for how you're performing now and how you just absorb everything as far as going out there to perform and how you figured out what your talent is. Well, not your talent specific, but like more your genre of it. How do you talk about that?
Well, throughout the years, just being so involved with hip hop and R&B, I always wanted to maintain that sound because naturally that's what comes out of me as an artist is soulful R&B. I was very much influenced by the Donny Hathaways, the Stevie Wonders, the Prince, Michael Jackson, and neo soul artists such as D'Angelo and Yeba Smith. That I wanted to continue my path of providing R&B music today that still has that old school flavor. And so I would incorporate that with whoever I'm collaborating with in production and songwriting, right? And so I've been blessed to definitely collaborate with some great Bay Area artists and producers. Dom Brady is an example, CLOCKZ, Mikael, the whole Illmind crew, right? They've just been absolutely helpful in giving me a platform to share my music. Kuya Productions, I always pay homage to because they're my brothers. And that's where we started off, in Miss Saigon, creating amazing music and still having that motivation to continue on collaborating with anybody else. And they've always been supportive with that. So now we have a couple of great singles collaborating with hip hop artists that are out in all music platforms from Spotify to Amazon Music to Tidal to Apple Music. So it's out there. I released a single called Old School, and it just became this thing where it built continuity from single to single. And I worked my way in releasing CLOCKZ, which is another single that just released probably early January, I suppose, right? Or no?
This year.
This year. And then of course a few cameos with CLOCKZ, with Mikael, all produced by Dom Brady. And I think that is the magic to it, is that if you have those who are real with you and who just appreciate you as a vocalist, then the amount of singles that you release out there is endless, and they motivate me in wanting to continue to release more and more and more music. Right now, I'm just planning out my album because my vision of my album is to completely make it as tasteful, classic, with a little bit of edge. I always want to remember my urban roots, so I add that style into it. But I also want to always bring that R&B sound. Even though people can be judgmental about R&B, I believe in R&B. I believe that that's where music comes from. That's where the growth of gospel comes from, is rhythm and blues. You know what I mean? And so why not express that vocally with music today, and get people drawn by the style of music that I do. There's a lot of swag to it, a lot of soul, a lot of style, a lot of collaborations in the hip hop scene. So I'm going to continue to do my very best in releasing that style of sound.
So with that, what are like some of the politics that go into making an album? I mean, you hear about the big records and they take like 3 years to make one artist release an album. I'm sure there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, but when you make an album, is it just simply I'm making a bunch of songs and I put them together, here you go, or are you creating a theme, or and like they're supposed to flow a different way? How does that work?
So there's supposed to be a particular sound, right? And with that, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same complete sound on your second track, as long as it has that key signature style that you're looking for. And with me, what it comes down to is my voice. At the end of the day, it's the type of riffs that I do, based on feeling, emotion, how I'm conveying and executing vocally, and that will always maintain. I don't ever want to rely on any digital format like auto-tune, when people are just completely so dependent of it. That's not who I am. And luckily enough, still till this day, I work with so many great producers, and they say the same thing, like, why do you need auto-tune? There is no sense for you to utilize any type of auto-tune with your voice, because you have that raw, natural vocals that people have lost in such a long time. So to still maintain that with my performance on stage with Sold Out and a few gigs with D Groove, I still want to bring that to the lab, when I'm recording, and so that people can recognize that, oh, that's Jorasp, that's Johann singing. I could hear his voice, I could hear his raspiness, I could hear his style of riffs that he do. Like, I want that to be recognizable throughout my journey as a musician.
Like your signature sound.
Yeah, that's my signature
That's awesome.
sound.
Is this auto-tune the equivalent of that face filter that you see on Instagram, where it's like you put yourself on the camera and it like makes your face like skin perfect and like you're like this,
But vocally.
Yeah, but vocally, it's the same thing. Like, you could hear yourself thugh this auto-tune and you sound like the best thing since sliced bread. Then someone goes out and hears you in real life, like, wait a minute, is that the same guy that was just...
It just avoids from you challenging yourself to make a note perfect, right?
Okay.
So they'll manipulate your voice to pitch within an auto-tune app. So that's what they would do, is that they would utilize this particular feature in order to properly pitch your voice. That's what it initially is for. But then a lot of people like to have that flamboyant sound like T-Pain.
I was going to say, is that
you know
T-Pain?
what I mean? Yeah.
That's...
And some of Kanye West's albums, like, you can hear that auto-tune so obviously, and it's...
Well, you can, I can.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
I think also a lot of, these days, a lot of recordings have auto-tune because, when you're recording, it's a lot of money. Yeah. And if you don't know how to record properly, it could be hours on one track,
Correct.
And so sometimes engineers choose to use auto-tune because it's like, well, we'll just auto-tune you so we can fix that. Let's move on.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where it's a quick fix, right?
And it's not as time consuming.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So with him being a natural raw talent, and also what's helped him is his musical theater background, in the sense of like how to take care of your voice, how to utilize your voice, how to sing properly. Now, again, all of these young kids who think that, these singers who have success they don't know their background of how they gradually got there. They just think, oh, I have a voice, I could sing like that. It's like, no.
Yeah,
It's
that
not,
takes a lot of work.
There's a lot of work
There's
behind
a
it.
process to
And
that.
there's also ways that there's going to be a lot of sacrifice. If you are a vocalist, in the very beginning parts of being a recording artist, you have to not party so much. You have to protect your voice. There's a lot of things that you have to change that these singers, these young kids, they don't know. You know, so they strain their voice because they don't know how to properly sing. They so auto-tune comes into play because some of these recording artists that these people think that they can make money off of can easily use that app to make their millions.
Wow, look at that. I had no idea that was even a thing.
Yeah.
But in the rough stages, when you listen to that voice, right, it's
Yeah.
either two things. It's number one, right? You didn't work so hard to try to get that note and you relied on that filter. Or number two, it's kind of like, I'm just going to use a bit of it, but I know that with my natural voice, I can carry it. Just give me a chance. Give me some time. I'm willing to consume the time to make it perfect. And that was my frame of thought, right? When I'm recording behind the studio, like in the recording booth, I over and over and over and over again. I'm a very meticulous person when it comes to particular harmonies, segments of the verses, the bridge, so on and so forth, and the choruses, that I'm willing to do vocal, like I'm not dependent of that filter, that it's all about my voice. And that's what people have to remember me by, is that natural quality of voice rather than, oh, he'd put auto-tune there because it's so obvious.
So he has a trained ear, and he can determine in his recordings of every vocal part what is off, what is not, what's in sync. Like, that is part of, you know, what a sound engineer does. So when he's recording, he does it all. He is everything, right? When it comes to his work. So when you're listening to the final project or, you know, song, that's all him. That's all of his work. It's not just the vocals. It's, you know, creating the melody, creating the harmony, creating the lyrics, you know, trying to piece everything together. And that's a puzzle also. That's a whole different side of what him as an artist. So I could say he's a very well-rounded recording artist, because these days recording artists don't even do what he does.
And don't get me wrong, I invite auto-tune, Mike. Like, I mean, in places that I feel is necessary. If I wanted it to definitely build a nuance, like Zapp and Roger, right? Or like
You're like looking at me like I don't know.
like, you know, the old school 1970s sound where they had that vocoder. Then of course I will invite that, you know, auto tunes to come in to certain segments of the song. Like for instance, Old School, right? That was my first single that came out back in 2022, just last year. And I invited putting in a type of vocoder effect at the very end. And it was so effective, and people enjoyed that. And they're like, oh my gosh, you got that Zapp and Rogers sound at the very end. That's so cool. That's so West Coast. And I'm like, that's the reason, that was what I intended that last segment of the song to be, so that you can envision that old school style of sound, right? Not to sound like T-Pain or to sound like Kanye West, but to envision what classic vocalists used to use when it used to be a vocoder rather than an auto-tune.
You're right. That sound that was from a different age that you just don't hear anymore. There's that classic sense to it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty interesting. I never would have thought of it that way. Just so you know, this is how easily conversations can go. We're almost at the 2-hour mark here. That's how things can flow.
Yeah.
Everybody says that who's sitting in that chair. It's been that long because you get into it and it gets exciting.
Yeah.
This is do you care to know what the score was? Should we ask her?
What's the
She's
score?
not smiling. Should we ask?
Oh, I mean, the Wi-Fi went out, so I can't check the score.
Oh,
So
do we
maybe
want to
there's
know?
a reason. Do we want to know? That's the
wanna know?
question.
I don't know. Do you
let's,
wanna- all right,
let's
hold on.
find out. Mike is about to reveal the score between Philadelphia Eagles.
All right, game is over and 31-7 Philly.
So we're out.
You guys are out. I'm a Raider fan, so I'm like, doesn't
I
bother me.
remember you being a Raider fan. So I was like, I don't think this game is going to be as important to
again,
Mike.
But thank you guys for coming out. I know we scheduled this before the NFC Championship game, but to still be able to feel this whole thing out has been awesome. What I really got out of this, honestly, was just how you guys are able to, work through the challenges that can come being in a relationship in these kinds of industries, because you always hear of like the big media people, like they're so successful, but it's hard for them to balance a relationship, and that communication, how important that is. When you guys were maybe in an area where you could have easily walked away from your talents, you said no. You continue to push through, and the lessons that you learn from being able to say, it took me till I was in my late 20s, early 30s before it started to click, and I really found out this is where I want to go. And you've gotten that nailed down. You're able to say, here's the path I want to do, and here's where I want to follow. Maybe I won't have the Drake's success, but I'm cool with that, because this is my brand. I have control over it, and this is what I want to do. It's a great thing, and it's a message that I hope that anybody who listens to this gets out of it, is that you're going to go through a lot of struggles. It can be a great career performing and in music and recording, but there's also the things that you don't see on TV, that you don't hear about, the 12, 15 hours in the recording studio trying to get that thing right. And, the traveling and the hours that you're actually practicing and performing, and then the partying, the late nights too, from like 11 p.m. till 4 a.m. And
oh gosh,
it's
I mean, there's a lot of times when I'll wake up and say, "Oh my gosh, thank God I'm alive."
I know. Many a times I would look in the mirror.
Because it's you don't realize the things that you are blessed with, and the opportunities, and sometimes when you forget and you take things for granted, you don't realize how lucky you are when you wake up the next day. But in closing with everything, I think what the trueness of what I got out of this is that because we are performing artists, I think art just in general, we're thankful that we have this outlet and that we were able to have a success out of it and continue to. Truly,
still do to this day.
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
That's what we are grateful for at the end.
I definitely want to get your information out there so people can come and listen to your music and find out how to get you on Instagram. Before, I want to let everybody know, if you're either listening on Apple or Spotify, or you're watching on YouTube and you enjoyed the episode, please like it, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment on Apple or Spotify, because believe it or not, that actually helps the listeners. This is a long podcast. Most of my episodes are. So the more positive reviews I get on there, the more people are going to take a chance to say, let's listen to what's going on here. I do have a Patreon page. If you enjoy the channel and you want to help to support it, I'll leave the link down below for my Patreon channel. It helps keep it going. It helps me be able to buy things for the podcast. And ultimately, I want this thing to last for many years to come. And so, Johann and Dorothy, where's the best place to find you? Where's the best place to find your music?
So I've got a couple of songs and singles that are out there. Old school, of course, you can definitely find it under my artist name, Jorasp. That's Jorasp, in all music platforms from Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Music. I also collaborate with some great hip hop artists, from Boulevard to C Keys to Mikael. And of course, those singles are Come Back Around, Hold You, and Get With You. And they're all in all the music platforms necessary for you to listen to. So please support Bay Area artists and Canadian artists by tuning in and listening to some great Bay Area music, some great R&B hip hop music.
And just so that you know, it's spelled J-O and then there's a space. R-A-S-P. And then old school is O-L''SKOOL. So just
is that
because
their Instagram handles, or is that if you search
that's
Spotify?
The actual, if you search by song or by artist. And just because we've had some people message us and say, I can't find you, I'm doing it this way, and it's like, no, you have to type it in this way. So just wanted to clarify.
Well, I'll leave the link down there in the description, especially for your Instagram page. And if they go to your Instagram, you have the direct links there, correct?
Exactly.
Yes. Makes it easier.
And one last thing, if you don't mind,
absolutely, go ahead.
Mike, if I can interject. I perform across the Bay Area, usually at the 707 with Sold Out. That's SOUL''D out, O-U-T. And our next gig will be in Vino Godfather performing. If you'd like to know the dates and you're free to come on in, please go to Sold Out's Instagram or Facebook or even YouTube, and it gives you a taste of exactly what we do with some great classic R&B music. So please join in the fun. We would love your support, but at the same time, we'd love for you to have a great time with us.
Perfect. I have a lot of links there to get on the description page, so I'll make sure I get that done. If I miss one, if it's all linked on your Instagram, it's easier to say, click the Instagram and then click here, and then I can go get the things. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming out on a
Thank
Sunday.
you.
It's starting to get dark now. That's that time of the year.
Yeah.
But this was a great conversation. We're going to have round 2 one day. And if you, by any means, if any of your artist friends want to come on, I'd love to hear, another
That
take
would
on
be
the industry.
awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having
definitely.
us, Mike.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody for watching and listening. And thank you for your continued support of the show. Please make sure, again, you like and subscribe to the video and to the channel. And everybody, you have a good day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.